what is messaging? What is it actually? And how can it help us? How can it help us tell the story of prevention? So, to start, messaging is how we shape what we say to influence understanding and action. So, again, my reflection with my sister, what I said to influence her understanding and her action mattered because if I would have just, I didn't hear her say any public health terms, so I'm not going to bring up public health research or, anything like that because I was able to listen to what she said, what her goals were with her students. I was able to translate that into something that made sense for public health and then be able to talk about, hey, like, do you know you're actually doing this thing? And that's what funders are going to put in grant applications, or, that's what this body of research is talking about. It's what you're actually doing. So we'll go through a lot of these throughout today's web conference, but effective messaging considers what change we want to see. Yesterday's web conference, we talked a lot about how there's awareness about sexual violence and intimate partner violence, and then there's prevention of sexual violence and intimate partner violence. The difference between the two is that prevention is action-based. And so when we're considering what an effective message is for prevention, it's important that we think about what is the action happening here. Maybe less to do with raising awareness, but that also depends on where your community and where your audience is at. We can't assume that we're all on the same page, and we'll talk about that later when we talk about explaining this work with tangible concepts and not just terminology. Effective messaging also considers who we're talking to, who our audience is, and that is part of knowing who you're talking to. We also have to consider who is delivering the message, who is the messenger. I could have said the same thing to my sister that her principal or vice principal did, but because it was us talking, it's received in a different way. Um, and so we'll talk about that in the next few slides too. And then finally, effective messaging considers the cultural and political context. We want to make sure that our messages are relevant to our audience, and part of that relevancy is, what else is happening outside of the immediate conversation that we're having. So the first one to think about, who is your specific audience? We could spend an additional 90-minute web conference on segmenting audiences, understanding how to target for like a super, super niche audience. I mean, advertisers and marketers are great at this because I know I get super targeted Instagram ads all the time. So this is a tool from that arena that we can use in our sexual and intimate partner violence prevention work. So I know this happens for me when I talk about prevention. I talk about it differently when I'm talking to a business leader who is looking for a workplace sexual harassment prevention training than I would if I were talking to a campus or a school district who might be looking for something similar. They're looking for the same prevention programming, but they're two different audiences with two different goals. They probably have different regulations in mind too. And even though we have a similar goal, which is preventing sexual harassment in their community, it's still important for me to approach that message and that conversation differently because each of them have other goals and needs and agendas surrounding that shared goal that we have. It's also important for us to ask ourselves, what are we trying to get across in this moment? What is the action that we want people to take? Are we thinking that, we have a specific deliverable or a program in mind? And if we do, how does it relate to that person? So we can say that we want to do a bystander intervention training with a community, but what does that actually mean to the person who's hearing your message? Do they understand what bystander intervention is? Do they think it's something that only applies at the airport? Like, see something, say something, and they're confused. Like, well, what do you mean bystander intervention for sexual and intimate partner violence prevention. And so how do we communicate what we're trying to get across to the other person in plain language without using jargon that helps establish a shared understanding of what we want to have happen? We'll talk about later how in our field we rely on a lot of concepts, and we know that everyone can have a different definition of what that concept is. And so it's important to have a shared understanding of what something like bystander intervention is. So that way you don't show up and they're like, I thought we were going to talk about not leaving bags unattended at the airport. What do you mean you're talking about sexual and intimate partner violence prevention? The next thing for us to think about is, yeah, like what change or what action do you want to see? And part of that is that, as we discussed yesterday, prevention is all of those actions that move us beyond awareness and into change. And so it's important for us to think very specifically about the action we want to communicate. So that way we're not limiting ourselves. And so we're also drawing people into a shared goal. And we're pointing all of us in a similar direction to achieve our prevention action. Because one of the things someone said earlier for how did they describe prevention before they had public health language, they said stranger danger. That's not very action based. That's very awareness based. And that's fine. It's maybe not the most applicable to what we know about how sexual and intimate partner violence happens, but it is an easy phrase for kids to remember. And if we were to take that a little bit further into prevention, we would want to have some sort of action around it, like notify a trusted adult or something along those lines, or be a trusted adult. Look out for if a child is yelling stranger danger or something like that. So the next question that we'll ask ourselves is, how might the broader context influence how our message is received? So this is not just like the social level of the social ecological model. This can be what's happening at the community level. This can also mean what's happening at the interpersonal level too. So thinking about, could you be speaking with an administrator at a school who had a recent sexual violence case that happened in their community in the news? This could mean thinking about, are you speaking with someone at a foundation that has worked on other issues in your community but hasn't yet engaged with violence prevention? So maybe they work on food scarcity or they work on housing security. You know the connection between meeting basic needs and sexual and intimate partner violence prevention. This person may not. And so when you're approaching them and talking about sexual and intimate partner violence prevention, they may be very confused and not seeing the connection. But we know, as preventionists who travel that bridge between institutions and communities, that we can make that connection for them. And then, obviously, if there's something bigger happening culturally, is there a big media story that's being covered in the national news that could be bringing sexual violence or intimate partner violence to the top of people's minds? It could even be something like, is there a popular TV show or movie that has a scene or a storyline about sexual and intimate partner violence prevention that you know is really popular with the audience that you're talking to? I remember, I think some people were talking about The Summer I Turned Pretty had an element of intimate partner violence or an unhealthy relationship in it. Don't fact check me on that. I did not watch it. And I'm a little beyond the target audience for that show. But if I were talking to, a group of college students who would be really engrossed in college age students who were really engrossed in that show, I would want to know that information going into the room. When I was an educator on a campus, there were so many times where I'm caught off guard because people are bringing up examples from TV and media that I had no idea what was going on. But that's what was relevant and resonating for them when we were talking about sexual and intimate partner violence prevention. So, relate and connect those stories and make prevention relevant to them. Okay, finally, the last messaging question to ask or consider, and this is one that I've struggled with before. Who is the best messenger to deliver your message? And I say that I've struggled with this before because I have been in previous experiences, I have been the solo preventionist. And so it's kind of like, well, if it's not me, then who? Because there's no one else who has the preventionist title, who has the preventionist name tag. And Ashley yesterday on our web conference had shared prevention doesn't always wear a name tag, and that's okay. And that's how it should be. Because if we believe that sexual and intimate partner violence is preventable and that everyone has a role to play, that means that there are other messengers absolutely available to deliver our message. That means our role as the preventionist is to support those messengers. How do we ensure that they have the skills and the knowledge and the presence to stay on message, but deliver it in a way that they know is going to resonate with their audience? And so it's so important for us to own and recognize when we are and when we aren't the right messengers. And when we know that we aren't the right messenger, how do we support the ones who are to deliver a message that's in line with our shared goals? Being in previous roles of being the solo preventionist, I remember being the one standing up in front of a group of fraternity members. I remember being the only preventionist being up in front of the room at a fraternity house. And I can gain relevancy because I can talk a little bit about football. Don't ask me about baseball. Don't ask me about basketball. Um, so I can gain a little bit of relevancy there, but I can say the exact same thing that a trusted leader within that fraternity would say, and they won't hear it when I say it. I'll sound like the parents in the Peanuts series. When they hear it from someone that they know, they trust, they enjoy, they have a bond with, that's going to go so much further. So looking back on that experience, it would have been so great to be able to train other people in how to deliver prevention messages. And youth are so amazing at finding relevancy in pop culture when it comes to talking about sexual and intimate partner violence prevention. I also think of like the temporal nature of like when you're a good messenger with a group or not. Because yeah, like a couple decades ago, I would have been a great, youth preventionist. I walk in there now and it's going to be like that meme of like, hey, fellow kids. Like, they're like, who is this person and why is she talking to us? Peer-to-peer prevention has been very effective. So people are already drawing those connections between our role as a preventionist is to also support others in delivering an effective and actionable prevention message. This isn't unique to our field at all. This happens in so many different areas of our lives. For me, my brother-in-law is a great outdoorsman. He's been on search and rescue before. My partner is a great researcher. If I'm asking for safety tips for a hike, both of them will probably tell me the exact same thing. One, because my partner researched it, and two, because my brother-in-law lived it, trained it, knows how to do rescues in those environments. But when I hear the message from my brother-in-law, I'm going to take it a little bit more seriously because I know he has the experience and the relevancy there.